Thanks for inviting me to speak. My talk is entitled Path to a Self-Sustaining Commercial Economy in LEO. I actually put this pitch together 2 days ago. Was not expecting the press release yesterday from the White House, nor the comments from Mr. Gerstenmaier this morning. So I'll take a little bit of liberty with it because I don't think I need to motivate it the same way after that announcement. And it just shows you that 48 hours in the commercial space business is actually old news. So we'll start. This is trivial simple or trivially painful, one of the two, just to kind of talk about what are the kind of pinch points for the commercialization of low Earth orbit. First of all, you need a market that is big enough to support multiple competitors, or conversely, your business case has to close by capturing only a small fraction of that available market. And you have to get to a cash flow positive balance sheet as fast as possible. And that means early revenue opportunities are really important for commercialization. That valley of death there is, we have the capitalization of new, especially new space, is kind of a wait and see. So getting through there is the big filter which most of the small companies need to get through. So what do we see as the major activities? Well, currently, the ISS, there's a bit of commercialization there. There's research and technology payloads. About $400 million is spent annually on those payloads. A big chunk of that is exploration support that is emerging. These are the types of technology maturation payloads that will go to help exploration efforts. And then there's a little bit of space tourism in there also for individuals wanting to go to space for a 2-week stay on the International Space Station, which is about $40 million a pop or so. So there's an established market there. We actually see there's some new entrants to make up that market, including in-space manufacturing, in-space assembly, and kind of a new category called sovereign astronauts. These are professional astronauts sponsored by other governments that are not part of the partners of the ISS. So is that going to be big enough to support a commercial operation? There we go. So we had an independent study conducted to look at the addressable market for those commercial activities. You can see their manufacturing, research, space tourism, and sovereign astronauts. And the total addressable market looks to be pretty good, about $37 billion between 2020 and 2030. So that's a good sign. You can see that 2/3 of that growth is in crew transport and stays on orbit. So that, I think, in the near term is going to be the largest growth sector for commercialization in LEO. The scientific research is really sponsored by governments, and how that market will be opened up for the commercial interests is TBD. So it is a growing segment, but how that is actually going to be commercialized is an open question. So today on ISS, they've done quite a good job of fostering the commercialization of payloads, and you could count about greater than 30% of those payloads can be considered commercial. Now these aren't commercial in the sense that they pay their entire way. There are still the subsidies in transportation and on-orbit operations that these users aren't currently paying. So that's an important factor to consider when you look at the elasticity of the market based on price and the subsidies that go into those payloads. So we think the transition path is really two-pronged. It's the incremental buildup of capability and the handoff of revenue streams, early revenue streams of that handoff of the commercial side. That can be started by having commercial modules attached directly to the International Space Station. that allows the infrastructure cost to get to have a presence on orbit less than a full-blown space station. And the time to develop a fully commercial space station is probably outside the realm of that valley of death for most companies. Let's see, the Axiom plan is to start with a module, and I'll show that to you, but then eventually leave ISS after end of life, and then bring a lot of that science and the core mission of the ISS with it, and to a new commercial space station after ISS retirement. So this is the press release that came out yesterday that kind of backs that basic philosophy to provide companies the opportunities to do commercial business on space station by assigning ports and also the logistics around that. So Axiom Space, so it's broken up into kind of a multi-pronged or phased approach. So the 5-year plan is to build and launch a crew-capable module. You can see there that we've selected Node 2 forward in this example. It's a very large module. It would be the largest module on station. It's comparable to taking the laboratory, U.S. laboratory, and Node 2 and basically squishing them together. It will have propulsive capability, so it'll be a visiting vehicle as it arrives at the ISS, and it will also have a multitude of berthing and docking ports in order to accept visiting vehicles as well as other pressurized modules. The 10-year plan is then to transition from an ISS module to a Axiom Station module. So it would depart the International Space Station and link up with other elements that were pre-deployed in the same orbit as ISS, and transition a lot of that knowledge and potential payloads that want to come along for the ride over to the new space station. So it adds a very seamless transition between what is being done today on the ISS and what the commercial space station capability would be. 20-year plan is to keep adding capability, more modules, and really you start thinking about is a city in space. So potentially 100 people at a time could be occupying this industrial zone in low Earth orbit. And the vision here is really to make that happen, living and working in Earth orbit, make that commonplace, and also as a way for deep space exploration. So we're looking at a launch date about 2020. So the initial location will be the International Space Station. You can see there that there's a propulsion bus there. It's unpressurized, a forward docking adapter, a couple of common berthing mechanisms for on the radial ports. And lots of windows. So windows are important from both the crew perspective as well as from the science perspective. There's also a pass-through airlock, very much similar to the GEM airlock. And we have some power generation capability, as well as our propulsion capability to get us there and to generate some power while we're berthed to ISS. This is a early conceptual design of the inside. So one of the things that we wanted to do is make this very habitable volume for crew, visiting crews. The idea is that we would have 7 crew members at a time for short stays between 2 weeks and 2 months. The individual crew quarters, you can see the green sleeping bag there to represent the sleeping areas. So they have their own private quarters. They have their own private viewing windows, so they're all on the nadir side of the module. It has a full ECLS capability, so it'll be doing all the life support and regenerative capabilities needed to support the crew, galley, potty, hygiene station. So pretty much the full crew capability will be packed into this module. In addition, you see in the middle there's payload space, and what we've done is we went away from the normal rack configuration that ISS has and tried to get a little bit more packing efficiency. And those modules are designed to be almost like CubeSats. And so they're basically payload drawers that slide in and out, and they come in a variety of sizes, basically a 25 centimeter square face with varying depths. And the idea is that you could more efficiently pack payloads into that volume. If you put two of them together, you have a mid-deck locker equivalent. So bringing payloads from that in that form factor over is very doable. And then you can also see the pass-through airlock there. So this is the conceptual design that we put together for our systems requirements review. We're going to go through some additional design iterations. This is the basic thinking that we have there. And then eventually the Axiom Station. The Axiom Station would be additional modules, power generation, propulsion, as well as the Axiom modules. This would be one of the first incarnations of it that would take over a lot of the capability that the ISS has today. And then kind of our progress to date and forward plan. We've got our seed round. We've completed our SRR. We have a Space Act signed with NASA. They've approved the program, ISS program has approved a CR for requirements, maturation and interface definition. Axiom Space LLC is an official company now. And we're working hard to get letters of intent from potential customers. The start of our PDR season is in December. And we plan to launch the vehicle late October 2020. So I ran through that really fast. Hopefully we'll have some good questions coming up here. All right, thanks.
All right, thanks, Mike. So we do have a couple of good questions coming in from the audience here. And keep them coming, please. What launch vehicle is your Axiom module going to use?
Well, we're still looking at that. Notionally, we've looked at the Falcon Heavy. It's a very large module, very heavy. So we're looking at greater than 50,000 pounds. And we need a very large envelope also. So it's a long fairing, 5 meter long fairing. So that's kind of, we're looking at other alternates.
Diameter or length?
So diameter is 5 meter fairing, and it's 13 meters long.
13 meters in length, okay.
That's right.
All the better to sleep in. I like that idea of the astronaut sleeping bag pods with views. Now that's an idea. I like it. Why replace the ISS? Why not replace modules incrementally as they reach the end of life? Why don't we start there by defining the end of life, whatever that means?
Right. So that's really not. That's NASA's decision, and that's I think the stated policy. Mr. Gerstenmaier has said that publicly, that they would like to see low Earth orbit to the commercial interests. I think the agreements that are in place now are in the 2024 timeframe, maybe 2028. So there is a natural desire to retire ISS after a certain amount of time and then hand over the responsibility to carry out research commercially through a commercial station, I believe.
What types of assurances are your investors seeking prior to making funding available to you, and how is fundraising going?
Really not my area, but the feedback we've gotten is very good. There is a lot of interest. A lot of interest in other governments wanting to be able to get into the space arena. I think that's probably going to be some of the anchor customers are foreign governments. And then hopefully we can convince other companies like NanoRacks and so forth to offer services through us.
So do you envision starting off with one module which you might sell pieces to and have multiple investors? Do you envision selling I don't know, one to China, one to the Emiratis, one to the South Africans? How
I
do you
think
see that?
a lot of that is in play. I can't really speak to it, but there'll be things from a pure investment and from a client side. And those two things together will, I think, close the business case.
And do you envision having one standard module, or do you envision working with your customer to incorporate different specs in?
We have been working with a lot of the payload customers, and we have been getting their inputs, and we've actually factored that into our requirement set. I think we're going to have a very attractive offering for the payload community.
So getting back to the ISS for a moment, this is an interesting one. Could the Axiom module be ejected and sustain orbit after a disaster that might require evacuation from the ISS?
We actually have that in our requirement set, that we be able to detach and separate from ISS, whether we're asked to or because of some emergency that requires it. We actually are putting in our requirement space that we can basically do that from the ground without crew intervention.
So getting back to the private sector for a second, do you envision building your own market of space tourists? Is that part of your long-term vision? Is maybe putting up one your own and then building up the base, the customer
from
base?
a launch perspective or from just a training perspective?
No, from an astronaut user perspective. Could this become your own private space hotel? Would you also be?
Yeah, that there will be a flavor of that. There will be spaceflight participants that are looking for that hotel-like experience on orbit. And then the sovereign astronauts are more interested probably in what they can actually do once they're there in terms of science and research.
Are you thinking about also private companies? Just curious. What if you went to a Wiley, for example?
If they wanted to buy those services, they're available.
Great. Going back to the audience for a second, what process do you suggest NASA follow for choosing a commercial module to add to the ISS, given that there's only one spaceport?
Well,
or one port, excuse me.
Yeah, we've been in talks with NASA, and so that is going to be a very interesting how they're going to do that. I think they're probably going to compete that. I think there's going to be a lot of factors that will influence that. For instance, although we would take a port, we're giving 2 additional ports back and another docking port. So when you look at that, we're giving back more than we're taking.
Right.
And I think there's going to be a lot of that kind of bartering that would have to factor into the selection process.
The technological force multiplier, if you will.
That's right.
What effect will the build out of the Chinese space station have on your market, do you think? It's another competitor.
Potentially, if U.S. companies can utilize those facilities. It's hard to say. So far, I haven't seen a lot of commercial opportunities with either the Chinese launch or with their orbital aspirations.
Let's see here. Are you working on standard interfaces so others can build modules for your station? So those extra ports that you were referencing earlier.
Yeah, these are NASA standards. So the Common Berthing Mechanism, the NASA Docking Adapter, or the IDS. These are all standards that I think everyone is going to be using in the near term. So they can attach to ISS. They can bring visiting vehicles and so forth. So I think there are from a integration with ISS. I think that the standards are there. We're trying to develop standards for the payloads. We think we have an interesting concept that will allow you to buy smaller chunks and larger chunks easily, so there's more of a menu of options for what you want to do.
When it comes to the sales, let's say both for individual astronauts, but maybe also for these payloads, do you envision doing that yourself? Do you think you're going to pull in another distributor like a NanoRacks or something along those lines?
I think both possibilities are there. We've consulted a lot of the market out there to see how they would respond or operate in that kind of environment, and so we got some good feedback.
Are you getting? What do the potential customers think about a a potentially new interface? Is what you're offering so much better that they're willing to make that switch, or are you starting to get some grumbles as well?
For new payloads, they really don't care what it is as long as it's well defined and they have the interfaces that they want, whether that is power, data, vacuum lines or cooling lines, things like that. Those are the interfaces. The availability of the interfaces are more important than the pure form factor. Although being able to take smaller chunks or larger chunks is attractive also.
Flexibility, absolutely. Yeah. Back to the audience. Can your module be adapted for in situ use on the moon?
I guess in principle, you'd have to get it there. So that would be the challenge. How would you land a 50,000-pound module on the lunar surface? Yeah, in principle, you'd have to deal with power generation and obviously cooling that would have to be brought through other systems, but yeah.
Excellent. Yep. Mike, thanks so much for your time and your insights. Appreciate it.